The steam from David's tea curled into the quiet air of his Lagos apartment. Outside, the Sunday morning was still. No traffic noise, no shouting from the street vendors. His phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it without thinking, expecting a message from one of his work clients. It was from Vanessa. "I want a divorce. All communication through my lawyer." David read the words twice. There was no hi, no explanation, not even his name. Just a cold, final statement. He set the phone down slowly. No rush of anger, no panic. He didn't feel the need to call her or type a paragraph asking why. He simply typed back one word. Understood. He stirred his tea, took a sip, and walked to his study. His laptop was already open from the night before. With a few clicks, he logged into their joint bank accounts and removed her access. Next, he called the bank to cancel all her credit cards. Then he called his insurance company and had her name taken off his health plan. Vanessa had not worked a single job in the last 4 years. She liked to say she was between projects, but David knew she was fully dependent on him. Her rent, her shopping sprees, the weekend trips to Dubai. He had paid for all of it. By the time he finished his tea, the financial umbilical cord was cut. No more allowances. No more easy swipes of a gold card. His phone rang less than an hour later. It was Vanessa. He didn't pick up. A text followed immediately. "Really, David? This is how you want to play." He ignored that too. The truth was, David had seen signs for months. Late nights, sudden girls' trips. That didn't add up, the way she'd stopped talking to him like he mattered. But she had made her move first, and he wasn't about to give her the comfort of a soft landing. 3 days later, his phone was lighting up nonstop. Unknown numbers. Messages from people he hadn't spoken to in years. Finally, he picked up one of the calls. It was a man's voice, urgent and irritated. "David, this is Mrs. Adeoye's lawyer. We need to talk immediately." David leaned back in his chair, a slow smile formed. That was when he knew the real war had just begun. David was 38 years old, a man who had built his life from the ground up. He grew up in a small town in Ogun State, the oldest of 4 children. His father drove a taxi, and his mother sold food by the roadside. Money was always tight, but his parents taught him discipline and pride in hard work. He studied computer science at university, often doing freelance IT jobs just to afford his books. By the time he turned 30, he had worked his way into a successful career as an IT consultant, traveling between Nigeria and the US for projects. He had money now, real money, and he lived in a modern apartment in one of Lagos's high-rise buildings. He had nice suits, a car that turned heads, and a bank account that could handle unexpected expenses. But what he didn't have was someone to share it with. That changed the night he met Vanessa. It was at a tech networking event in Abuja. David had been invited to speak on cybersecurity. Vanessa wasn't from the tech world. She was there as a guest of a friend. She was beautiful in a way that made the room seem brighter. Long hair, easy smile, the kind of confidence that made people listen when she spoke. She told David she had grown up in Ikoyi, went to private schools, and had a degree in communications. Her family was wealthy, but she made it sound like she was independent. They talked for hours that night. David, who usually kept his guard up, felt himself relax. Vanessa laughed at his jokes, asked about his dreams, and touched his arm when she spoke. Within 3 months, they were inseparable. By the 6th month, he proposed. It felt like a whirlwind. One moment he was single, the next he was married to the woman he believed was his perfect match. For a while, it was exactly that. She brought excitement into his life. Fancy dinners, spontaneous trips, parties where everyone seemed to know her name. He loved the way she carried herself, the way she made him feel like he belonged in circles he had never dared to step into before. But over time, small cracks appeared. The first 2 years of their marriage were filled with travel and laughter, but the last 2 were different. Vanessa started going out more without him. She said she was meeting friends for drinks, but she would return late at night, smelling faintly of expensive perfume and someone else's cologne. She guarded her phone like it was a state secret, turning the screen away when messages came in. David noticed, but didn't want to believe it meant anything. He told himself she just needed space. His mother, however, was never convinced. From the beginning, Mama had warned him. "David, some women don't marry the man, they marry the lifestyle. Be careful." He had defended Vanessa every time. He told his mother she was different, that she loved him, not his bank account. But defending her became harder as her spending grew. Shopping sprees that ran into millions of naira, constant upgrades to the apartment's decor, and luxury trips with her friends that she insisted were good for network. She didn't work, and she didn't seem interested in finding a job. David had the money, yes, but he had also worked too hard to throw it away carelessly. He began to notice that when he tried to talk about budgeting or saving, Vanessa would get defensive or change the subject. If he pressed further, she would accuse him of being stingy. In the last 6 months, David had started preparing quietly for the possibility that things could fall apart. He reviewed their accounts, made sure certain investments were in his name only, and stopped adding her name to new assets. He didn't want a divorce, but he wasn't going to be caught unprepared if she decided to leave. And then, one quiet Sunday morning, the text came. The night before the text, David had been in the living room, finishing up some reports on his laptop. It was almost midnight, and he was about to shut everything down when he heard soft laughter coming from the bedroom. He stood quietly at the doorway. Vanessa was sitting on the bed with her phone in her hand, the screen angled slightly away from him. She was wearing one of her silk nightgowns, hair loose around her shoulders. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but her smile was wide. "Yes, I'll see you soon," she said into the phone, her tone warm in a way David hadn't heard directed at him in months. He didn't recognize the voice that replied. It was a man's, deep and relaxed. David felt a tightness in his chest. Vanessa glanced toward the doorway, and he stepped back before she could see him. He didn't want to have the conversation. Not now, not like this. He walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and stayed there until he heard the bedroom light switch off. When he went in, she was already under the covers, her phone face down on the nightstand. She said good night like nothing had happened. He simply replied, "Good night," and lay down. He didn't sleep much. In the past, he might have asked her who she was talking to, but David had learned something over the years. People who are hiding something will lie without blinking. He wanted the truth, and truth needed time and proof. So he stayed silent. The next morning, sunlight was spilling into the apartment when his phone buzzed. He was in the kitchen making tea. The message was short, almost businesslike. "I want a divorce. All communication through my lawyer." David read it slowly, his mind already moving past the sting of the words. No argument, no, we need to talk. Not even a hint of sadness. It was cold, calculated. She had decided this in advance, and the timing wasn't random. David suspected she was rushing to file before certain investments he had matured, maybe even to claim a share of property in his name. She knew enough about his finances to make trouble. For a brief moment, he thought about all the years they'd spent together, the good and the bad. But that moment passed quickly. If Vanessa wanted a fight, she had chosen the wrong day and the wrong man. David replied with one word, "Understood." Then he calmly set his phone down and opened his laptop. Within the hour, her credit cards were canceled, her access to joint accounts was gone, and her name was removed from his health insurance. He didn't bother to explain. He knew she'd find out soon enough. He felt no pleasure in doing it, but there was a certain clarity in his actions. She had made her move, but this wasn't going to be a game she could win easily. By the time the day was over, David's role in this marriage had shifted. He was no longer the husband trying to hold things together. He was the strategist preparing for war. It didn't take long for Vanessa to notice what David had done. By Monday morning, his phone lit up with a stream of messages from her. "Wow, so you're petty now? Cutting me off? Really? You'll regret this, David." He didn't reply to any of them. The silence seemed to make her angrier. By the afternoon, he began seeing things on social media. Vanessa's friends were posting cryptic comments that were clearly aimed at him, calling him cheap, bitter, and insecure. One even wrote, "Imagine divorcing a man and he acts like he's your father cutting your allowance." David read them without emotion. He had expected this. Vanessa had always been good at building a public image of herself as the victim whenever things didn't go her way. The first call from her lawyer came on Tuesday. The man introduced himself politely, but his tone carried a certain arrogance. "Mr. Adeyemi," he began, "Vanessa has informed me that you've cut off all her financial support. Considering she has no source of income, we are requesting immediate temporary spousal support while the divorce is processed." David kept his voice calm. "She has been living a luxury lifestyle for 4 years without a job. That's her choice, not mine. I'm not responsible for funding it now that she's decided to leave." The lawyer tried to press the matter, saying they would file an urgent motion with the court. David ended the call without promising anything. That night, his phone rang again. This time it was Vanessa's father. "David, what is wrong with you?" the older man demanded. "You've humiliated my daughter. She's telling everyone you've thrown her out without a kobo to her name. Do you want to ruin our family's name?" David chose his words carefully. "Sir, with respect, your daughter left this marriage on her own terms. I'm just following her request." Her mother called the next day, softer in tone but still angry. She spoke of duty and doing the right thing, until David realized they didn't actually want to talk about the marriage. They wanted to talk about money. By Wednesday, David decided he needed answers of his own. He hired a private investigator, a quiet, older man named Kola, who came recommended by a friend. Kola listened to the situation without judgment and nodded. "Let me see what I find." While Kola worked, David focused on keeping himself steady. But there were moments, late at night, sitting alone in his living room, when memories would creep in. He'd remember the woman who once ran barefoot with him on a beach in Zanzibar, laughing so hard she could barely breathe. He'd remember her hand in his at the airport, squeezing tight before he boarded a flight. That Vanessa felt like a ghost now, replaced by someone who spoke to him only through. 2 days later, Kola sent him a brief report. There were records of large cash withdrawals Vanessa had made in the past 6 months, far more than her usual spending. There were also messages, screenshots, between her and another man. The tone was intimate. The man promised to take care of her, once she was free. David read them slowly, the words burning into him. It wasn't proof of everything, but it was enough to make things clear in his mind. Whatever love they once had, it was gone. The tension escalated when Vanessa tried to log into one of their joint accounts. David got an alert immediately. She failed 3 times and then stopped. A few hours later, there was a loud knock at the gate of his apartment building. Security called up to tell him Vanessa was downstairs, demanding to be let in. David didn't go down. "She's not allowed entry," he told the guard firm. From his window, he saw her pacing at the gate, phone in hand, shouting at someone. She stayed for almost 20 minutes before finally leaving in a black SUV. As David watched her go, he felt no victory, only a deep, quiet resolve. This wasn't about punishing her. It was about protecting himself from someone who had already decided he was the enemy. The real truth came out a week later. Kola, the private investigator, called David and asked to meet in person. They sat at a small cafe in Victoria Island, away from the noise of the main streets. Kola slid a brown envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, printed messages, and bank transaction record. Vanessa's friend wasn't just some casual companion. He was a married businessman from Port Harcourt. His name was Chuka, and he had been quietly funding parts of Vanessa's lifestyle for nearly a year. Plane tickets, hotel stays, even some of the expensive handbags David had assumed she bought with his money. The messages were worse. In one, Vanessa wrote, "Once the divorce is done, I'll get a nice settlement from David, then we can make bigger plans." David sat back in his chair, staring at the papers. So it had never just been about the marriage ending. It had been a calculated move. She wanted to leave, but only after securing enough of his money to live comfortably. By the time the first court hearing came, David was ready. His lawyer, a calm, sharp woman named Ifeoma, had organized the evidence into a clean, devastating file. The courtroom was cold and formal. Vanessa arrived in a cream-colored dress, makeup perfect, chin high. She didn't look at David once. When it was her turn to speak, she painted herself as the victim. She told the judge David had been emotionally unavailable and that he had left her with nothing. She described him as controlling and cold, claiming she had been forced to seek comfort elsewhere. David sat quietly, hands folded, letting her talk. Then Ifeoma stood. She spoke with precision, presenting bank records of Vanessa's lavish spending, designer clothes, trips abroad, cash withdrawals far above normal expenses. Then came the screenshots of her messages with Chuka, showing not only an emotional relationship but also financial support. The judge asked Vanessa directly, "Is it true that you have been receiving financial gifts from this man while still married to the petitioner?" Vanessa's confidence slipped. She stammered, tried to redirect, but Ifeoma pressed with more records, dates, amounts, even hotel receipts. I don't think my personal friendships are relevant," Vanessa said finally, her voice sharper now. "They are relevant," the judge replied, "when you are requesting spousal support from the husband you are divorcing." Her composure cracked. Her face tightened, her voice rising. "David was never there for me. He buried himself in work. He treated me like a houseplant he only watered when he remembered." But under cross-examination, her claims began to fall apart. She couldn't give examples of neglect that matched the timeline of her spending trips. She couldn't explain why she had hidden the financial help from Chuka. The judge looked unimpressed. And then the twist came, not in the courtroom, but a day later. Kola called David again. "I think you'll want to know this. Chuka has cut her off." It turned out Chuka's wife had somehow seen the court records. Maybe through gossip, maybe through someone at the hearing. Either way, Chuka's messages to Vanessa stopped cold. He canceled her access to a private credit card and stopped replying to her calls. David didn't need to see her to know what that meant. Without David's money and without Chuka's, Vanessa's world had suddenly shrunk. The woman who once posted photos of champagne brunches and weekend getaways now had nothing to post at all. In court, her requests for temporary spousal support were denied. The evidence was too strong, and the judge ruled that she had not proven financial need in good faith. David walked out of the courthouse that day into the bright Lagos sun, feeling lighter than he had in months. The war wasn't just ending, it was ending on his terms. The final ruling came on a warm Thursday afternoon. The judge denied Vanessa's request for spousal support. She would leave the marriage with her personal belongings and nothing else. David kept his apartment, his investments, and most of his savings. When the gavel came down, Vanessa didn't look at him. She gathered her bag, stood, and walked out of the courtroom without a word. David stayed seated for a moment, letting the sound of the decision sink in. It wasn't joy he felt. It was something quieter, like a heavy weight finally being lifted. That evening, he sat in his apartment with the windows open, listening to the hum of Lagos traffic below. The place was silent now. No perfume hanging in the air, no designer shopping bags in the corner, no constant stream of visitors coming in and out. Just him, the city noise, and a sense of space he hadn't felt in years. He thought about the man he had been when he first met Vanessa, full of hope, eager to share his success with someone he loved. He also thought about how easily he had ignored warning signs, how much energy he had spent trying to keep something alive that had been dying for a long time. There was sadness for the years lost, but there was also clarity. He understood now that love, without trust and respect, was nothing more than a beautiful mask hiding something hollow. A few days later, his mother came over. She carried a pot of pepper soup, the kind she used to make when he was younger. They ate together at his kitchen table, not talking much at first. At one point, she reached across, placed her hand on his, and said, "You're free now, my son. Don't waste that freedom on anger." He nodded. She was right. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about moving forward. Over the next weeks, David poured himself into his work, taking on new projects and traveling again. He reconnected with friends he hadn't seen in years, went to the gym regularly, and even started reading for pleasure again. Small things, but they reminded him he was more than just the man who had been in a bad marriage. It was a bittersweet victory. He hadn't won by breaking Vanessa down. He had won by refusing to let her take him down with her. And that, he realized, was the kind of victory that actually lasts. Months passed. The rainy season had ended, and Lagos was buzzing with its usual energy. David was walking back from a client meeting when he decided to take a different route through a quieter street lined with small shops and cafes. As he passed one of the cafes, he glanced inside and froze for a moment. Vanessa was there, sitting alone at a corner table. A half-empty cup of coffee sat in front of her. She was scrolling through her phone, her posture slouched, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. There was no sparkle in her eyes, none of the easy confidence she once carried like a crown. She didn't see him. David stood there for a second, watching through the glass. There was no rush of anger, no surge of satisfaction, just a calm exhale. She was no longer part of his life. Her choices, her struggles, her loneliness. None of it was his responsibility anymore. He turned away and kept walking, the sun warm on his back, the city moving around him. For the first time in a long while, the future felt open. Sometimes the best revenge is moving on so far, they can't even find your shadow. Hey besties. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more great stories. See you in the next one. And guess what? Her friends invited everyone except her to their girls' trip, so she booked the seat right beside them. You won't believe what happened next. Bye.